Hello and welcome to Faith, Friends, and Hustle. I'm here today with my friends Jen Davis, Jordan Freed, and I'm excited for our conversation around the very word hustle. I am looking forward to this because in a world that pushes us to be busy and go for more, hustle in all of its different forms, varieties, and definitions, it certainly can cause a lot of unnecessary angst, anxious, and just work that's not productive or good or healthy for us. So I'm excited to dive in with my two friends today as we discuss hustle. To open it up, Jen, why don't you tell us just a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So my name is Jen Davis. I'm located in Springfield, Missouri. I've got two kids. I've got Caitlin, who is 2 weeks shy of being 18. And then I've got Cooper, who is 13. I co-own a real estate team with Dan Holt, Holt Homes Group, and I am a coach with MAPS. So I have had the privilege of getting to work with you and Jordan in a variety of different ways over the years, and super pumped to talk about this topic. I probably have a different perspective now than I would have had a year ago or 2 years ago or 5 years ago. So that's me.
Looking forward to it. Jordan, how about you?
Hi, I'm Jordan Freed, and I'm also a MAPS coach. I've been coaching full-time now for about 10 years. I have my wife, Rochelle. We've been together for 21 years, married for 12, and went K through 12 together. I actually met her when I was 5 years old on a soccer field. And we have two daughters, Leah and Zoe. Leah's 10 and Zoe's 8. They're both about to turn over there. Leah's about to turn 11 and Zoe's about to turn 9. And, I've loved this topic, but one thing that everybody should know that if Jen and I are together, there's going to be a fair amount of talking about the Kansas City Chiefs. So if you don't like the Kansas City Chiefs, I don't know if this episode is going to really be for you. But we're both avid Chiefs fans, and we're just on a hair obnoxious about it. So I wanted to preface that, Zach. I think it's important for everybody to know that.
Well, this will be great because coming from a third-party person who knows very little about football, this will be an interesting conversation when it comes through.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, we can sway you. We can get you to be a fan. We've got room. We've got room for you to be a fan.
Yeah.
I love it. Let's talk about hustle and let's talk about converting me to a football fan.
Perfect.
So where do you want to go with this conversation? It's interesting because from my perspective, I would look at it and say, you got to have some hustle, right? Meaning you got to put in some work. There's got to be some time there. And this may not be true for everyone. This is just my perspective. And lens I look through, I see it and I go, okay, everyone who appears to be successful has a hustle where they're really all in on it, from my view and where I go. So I would love just to start there. Like, what does that mean for you? How does that trigger and how does it bring it up? And it doesn't matter which one you want to go first. If Jen, you want to talk, get us started.
Sure. I think you're right, Zach. I think if I look at hustle or the people that I know that are successful, absolutely, there's hustle there, right? There's drive. You could call it grit. You could call it a motor, right? I think that when you're getting started in something, when you find your passion, hustle becomes easy. Right. I think for me, it was about the time I found real estate and I found being a buyer's agent. There was this idea of it didn't feel like a grind, right? It felt like fun. It felt like passion. And I had this motor to be successful. I wanted to help people and I wanted to be the best at the best that I could be in the skill set that I was developing. And so I think that hustle is one of those things that is like the platform. It's the launching of how do we get from baseline to successful? How do we get out of mediocre, right? How do we move the needle forward? And I think what happens is the hustle, there are times when it's fun. I think they're the healthy part of of hustle is fun. I think the healthy part of hustle is when we're passionate about what we're doing. And then I think that there can be times where hustle can be unhealthy. And that's more when it starts to feel like a grind, when people are like, you just got to keep grinding. You just got to keep going. You just got to keep doing this. And I think that you've got to have some boundaries around hustle. And I think that, Jordan, will have a much better, more succinct answer than I have. I say way more words, at 10 to 1 of words. But I think when you've got the hustle and it's healthy, I think it's fun. I think when hustle takes a turn and you start looking at maybe some unhealthy habits, I think it can be a dangerous place to be.
Yeah. I agree with Jen, and I think a lot of what she's talking about there is what's the intention of your hustle, right? And what I mean by that, and I think most people figure this out if they're paying attention, and that is that intention rules all. And the story that I tell in coaching people is like, imagine that there's this guy and he grows up and he's one of those people that for whatever reason, he felt very insecure. He felt like maybe he didn't just quite add up to his peers and maybe was never really accepted in high school. And so he goes off to college and he, becomes an attorney and he starts making serious money and he goes back to the town that he was from and he has something to prove, right, to this group of people that he didn't feel accepted from. And so he's building this career and he's getting more and more successful. And then that big house in the middle of town that everybody knows about comes up for sale. And he says to himself, I'm going to go buy that house. Now, he would never outwardly admit that the reason he's going to buy that house, the intention behind the house is so that everybody can see what a big shot he is, that everybody can see what he's made of himself. But his goal is to go buy that house. Now, if you compare that to another group, like let's just say it's a couple and they have 2 children that are 14 and 16. And this couple, both sets of their parents are getting a little bit more elderly. And they say, hey, that big house just came up for sale right there in the middle of town. And how cool would it be if we bought that house and then our parents, they could come stay with us and come and stay for extended periods of time, maybe 6 or 8 weeks. And it wouldn't feel like we were all piled in on each other. And then that way our kids would have a deeper relationship with their grandparents. That would be so awesome. Now, if you look at both groups, both of them have the same goal. The goal is the big house in the middle of town. But the intention behind the goal is very different. See, what the attorney guy is going to figure out is that nobody really cares about his success and all the things. And, he's searching for external validation, and external validation is an addiction that's always going to lead us to wanting more. Whereas this other group, the family, right, they bring their parents in and it's probably not going to be perfect. And yet, down the road, their kids have this close-knit relationship with their grandparents. They're going to feel like they won. Mm-hmm. And so one of them is baked in fear and one of them is baked in faith. And so as it relates to hustle is great if you're clear about what's the intention of my hustle. Yeah. Because if you're hustling from pathology, that's all you're going to get is more pathology. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It also makes me reflect. So I hear that, and my thought is hustle can be healthy when it's the fuel for the right priority.
That's right.
And goal. If we have the wrong target and now we've made hustle the priority around a wrong goal, we've now created potentially an unhealthy environment, right? We're using hustle in a way it wasn't intended.
And back in July, Jen texted me something. Jen and I are good friends and we text back and forth all the time. And I text her and just ask, how are you doing? And she texts me back, and Jen doesn't mind if I share this. I've shared this before. She says, I'm good. I listened to a podcast about rest last week. It was really good. My takeaway was, is it more important to be special or happy? For years, I thought being special would make me happy. It just made me really tired.
So true.
So I think, so Jen, doesn't that kind of layer into what we're talking about here?
It does. I think it's exactly that. I think it's what you talked about. I think it's what Zach talked about. It's this idea of, do we know why we're hustling? Do we know why we want more? Do we know why we're moving faster? Do we know why we're getting up in the morning? And do we know where we're putting our time? There's a book that I read, and Jordan, we talked about it. It was, I think, Spring Masterminds. It's really hard to be famous in your own home if you're never there, right? It's this Mark Batterson book. And I've had all of these epiphanies over the last probably 6 months to a year of, why am I doing what I'm doing? And why am I moving so fast? And what I've learned is, I think sometimes we hustle to not hit head on the things we don't want to look at, right? It's easier to keep moving. It's easier to say more. It's easier to say, oh, but look at this, I'm successful here, or I'm in this room, or I get to do this thing, or whatever. And the text that I sent Jordan, it's been years of hustle where I finally looked up and I was like, what's more important? Who do I want to be special to? And what's the price on happiness?
Yeah. And the thing, Zach, and you've heard this in your coaching career, I know Jen has heard it 1,000 times. What so many people want is, they want this balancing act, right? They want to be able to have it all. They want to learn, they want to win personally, they want to win professionally. And that is going to require hustle, right? That is going to require that grit. And yet, if you do not, one of the things I share with people often is that balance is the byproduct of boundaries. And that if you have hustle without boundaries, just understand that an obsessive focus on one area of your life, if other areas require your attention, family, health, that type of thing, just understand that boundless or boundaryless hustle is going to create a wake of destruction around you.
Mm-hmm.
And you hear this from people. I mean, Elon Musk is a great example. If you listen to him in one of the interviews he did over the summer, he said, a lot of people feel like they want to be me, but they don't want to be me. He said, my mind is a storm. And, we look at the richest man in the world and think, man, that guy's got to be immune from any type of pain or uncertainty or problems. And yet what you're noticing is the byproduct of somebody who can't turn it off. And how many times has he been married? And how many different women does he have children by, right? Like, and I'm not judging him for any of these things, but by his own admission, that's not what most of us would seek or want for our children, right? And so you've got to be able to create boundaries. Like, one of the things Jen shared was like, and she was laughing so hard when she said it, like tears were coming out of her eyes. She was like, I will never work another July ever again.
Nope.
And see, that's a boundary. That's an example of a boundary. Or I have another client. She's up in Wisconsin, and she has a boundary, and she lives by it. 5:30 every night, the phone goes off.
Mm-hmm.
And is her real estate business as big as some others? Nope. But every night that phone is off, and she is home being a mom.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going to hustle, that's awesome. That's great. Know why. Make sure that that's a healthy intention. And then you got to put some boundaries around that thing so that it doesn't create huge unbalance in your life.
Jordan, and I think like the idea behind that hustle is good. Absolutely, right? We all want to be successful.
Yeah.
The reason that I'm able to take July off is because I had a lot of hustle, right?
Mm-hmm.
I also made good financial decisions. I also recognize when it's enough. And I think that's the balance with hustle, right? If what Jordan's saying is true, which I believe it is, if we have boundaries, right, it's healthier for everybody. And then we can have success in multiple areas of our life. There's this idea of hustle, though, of what is enough?
Mm-hmm.
What's enough financially? What's enough? How are we measuring success, right? What is it that we're chasing so that we can actually celebrate it when we're there? I used to say to Jordan, and I said to Carrie Wersch, who actually is in our market center, my least favorite day of the year when I was in sales was December 31. And the reason it was my least favorite day is because that was it. That was the number. And the next day I was back to zero because I didn't have a healthy relationship with goals. There was no celebration of anything along the way, not monthly or quarterly. It was just this one big goal. And when you got there, woohoo, like that's awesome. And tomorrow is zero. And I think that's that understanding of not only boundaries and what's enough, also what are the milestones along the way? What are the other things that we can celebrate so that every day you get to enjoy and it's not just this never ending hamster wheel of a chase.
Yeah, it's so good. There's a scripture that comes to mind. It's 1 Corinthians 9:24-25. It says, do you not know that in a race, all the runners run, but only one receives the prize? So run that you may obtain it. Every athlete exercises self-control in all things, and they do it to receive a perishable wreath, but we an imperishable. And I think about that often because it's about the boundaries, right? It's having the right intentions. What are we running for? Where are we heading? So my thought goes to, how do we set the boundaries in place before we hit the bottom? Because for many of us, I think it's easy for us to talk about boundaries because we went there, we got burned out, or we lost maybe that hustle or that drive, and then thought, boy, I need to set some boundaries right on the way back up. So how do we get ahead of that?
Well, I mean, number one, I don't know that you're probably never going to work smart until you work hard. And I see a lot of people who they try to work smart, but they've never worked hard. And so I don't know that there's ever going to be this unavoidable way to never take yourself out of balance or hit some obstacles along the way. I think that that's inevitable, right? And there are only, there are certain things that you are only going to learn through experience. And that's one of the questions, in fact, that I ask coaching clients is, are you someone, and I don't ask this as a leading question. I ask them though, are you someone that has to learn things the hard way? Because if you are, then let's speed up that process. Let's learn the hard lessons so that you can learn them and we can move on, right? Now, there's a lot to what you just said about, how do we know the proper boundaries to set? And I could talk on that for days, but the one thing I could tell you that would probably work best for me is that I like to filter advice and things through the litmus or the perspective of what would I tell my daughters. And so one of the things that I ask people often, especially those of us, like all three of us have children, right? How is your current approach to life different than the one you would want for your children? And what I mean by that is, the parts of your life that you can still control. If you've had things like, I know I've made mistakes and done things in the past that, yeah, if I could go back and change that, then I would. And yet I can't. So what I mean is looking through the windshield, not the rear view mirror. How is your current approach to your relationships, your health, to your business, to whatever it is that you're pursuing or hustling around? How is that different than what you would want for your children? And to me, Zach, I mean, I just always feel like the advice that we would give to the people we love most is the richest, purest advice that we could summon. It's the purest of wisdom that we can get. And we just have to have the courage to find it. And so to me, that's kind of the North Star to answer your question.
I think that I'm somebody that typically has to learn the hard way. I mean, I'm that person, right? If somebody asked me that, I'd be like, ask Craig Zuber. I have a super high pain tolerance. I'll do something for a really long time until I look up and think, wow, that really hurts still, this amount of time later. Mm-hmm. So, Jordan's asked me that question when I've come to him for coaching advice of like, hey, I don't know how to make this decision. He will say, if Caitlin were in the same boat, right? Caitlin's about to be 18. Caitlin were in the same boat. What advice would you give her? That's right. Looking forward, that is the right question to ask. I think the other part of that is when there is the failure, when there is the thing that you're like, I'm going to be embarrassed by this later, or I'm going to be mad at myself later. I wish I wouldn't have done that, or I wish I wouldn't have said that. There's this idea of, when you get knocked down, get back up. Yes. But maybe we don't have to bounce up so fast that we don't learn the lesson.
Mm.
I come up, I want to be a different person. I'm going to get knocked down, but I'm going to stay down for just a second so that I can actually learn the lesson, so that I'm a better version of me when I get back up. And there's this idea of, do I want my kids to avoid failure? Absolutely. I would love it if they didn't make the same mistakes I did. And I do think that that we learn and we grow together by making those mistakes. My goal in making a mistake, though, is being vulnerable about it. When it happens, when I totally whiff, I think I'm going to apologize, or I'm going to ask for help, or I'm going to say that I messed up. Because what happens is that's where community comes in, right? That's where you get the people in your life that get to have a voice, or get to have an opinion, or get to be a mentor or a coach for you, right? And so for me, I take it very seriously when people say the best person that you can help is the person that you used to be. Yep, I would agree with that. But in order for me to help that person, I actually have to be super honest when I fail. And I have to have a group of people around me that can start to help me identify patterns. What's going on in my life when I start to make bad decisions, right? What's going on in my life when I'm winning? How do I recreate those habits? What am I eating? What am I drinking or not drinking, right? What am I reading? What am I listening to? And you start to think, I want to build that pattern, but when I fail, I want to take note of it so that I can learn from it.
Yeah, that is powerful. I always share the sentiment, any coaching partnership, mentorship partnership that I'm in, that it is 1,000% okay to come as you are, as long as we don't stay as we are. Right?
Yes.
That's it. Like, you can show up however, wherever you ask for it. We all fail, but learn the lesson. Right? Move on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and what she just said, like I recently had the opportunity to I have a doctor that he's a functional medicine doctor, and he operates outside of the American healthcare system, where he doesn't take insurance, and so he's a little bit different than most. And I interviewed him, and one of the things that he said that made it reminded me when Jen was talking, when she said, like, when am I winning and what are the patterns? And he said, you're only going to be as healthy as you are aware. And so what she's talking about, like, one, getting knocked down and not just popping back up, but using your awareness, right, to kind of look around. And the other thing that she said, and like, this has been a really hard year for me. Like, I lost my mom in July. It was a long, hard fought battle that we didn't win. And I'll never forget, I was driving to the hospital and I called Jen. Having the right people around you, right, is so important. And I called her and I said, I'm in the middle of all these projects and there's these people depending on me and needing this and needing that. And she just basically said, stop. None of that stuff matters. And none of those people, she's like, it's not that they don't matter. It's just that's not your priority. You need to go be with your family. And everything else is just everything else. It will work itself out. And anybody that has a problem with that, and she said, first off, nobody's going to have a problem with that. But anybody that does, that's not your responsibility. People are going to understand.
Mm-hmm.
And so what she's saying, it's so important. I think it's especially important as parents that we engineer our own villages. We have the right people around us. We have people that we can call on and that we trust in their counsel, right? And they know that we're there for them and vice versa. But then also, I think as parents, one of the greatest lessons, Zach, that we can learn in leadership is that sometimes you can have the right message and be the wrong messenger.
Mm-hmm.
And so learning to engineer villages around your children so that you can get the right messages. Like, it was one of the most I would say, amazing moments of my life where it was about a month ago, I had a client of mine that asked me to get on the phone and coach her 18-year-old daughter. And it wasn't some major life event, but she was really struggling. And I got on there, and just through a few little perspective shifts, it just opened up something in her. And she made a decision the next day to go visit this college, and found out it wasn't the right college for her. But she didn't avoid the college just because she was afraid of not getting in. She went and said, this just isn't what I want. And so to be able to pay it forward that way, to be part of that village, and then to have it around, it is just huge, because hustle can get itself in the right boundaries if you've got people who will help check yourself. Those people that will tell you, like, dude, you are just way out of bounds here, and then you can trust their intention. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It's so powerful. I have used, admittedly, stolen the right message, wrong messenger multiple times in conversations. It's so powerful when you have that shift of perspective and look at it that way, right? And you go through. I also think we've talked about it on this podcast a lot before. One of my favorite shirts I have is "Think Like a CEO," and it's a shirt that I've got, right? But mostly because I view it around the strength of people is by the strength of their board. And I view everything in a table. And you ask anyone who has agency to speak in your life at the table. And if you're the CEO, who do you got around you, right? Spouse, kids, family, friends, mentors. It should be a mix. And so I look at it from that perspective, right? Like, who do I have that I am giving them permission that you can speak into my life? Because I also think we've talked about village, building village, having community. Jen, you brought that up. But the reality of it is we also have to be careful on who we allow to give us that advice. Who are we listening to? And you brought up Elon Musk just as an example. Are they living the life we want? Are we taking advice from, right? So I think when I look at a board and I hear that, I go, who on my board that's supporting me has agency to call me out, to almost be that rev limiter on hustle? Be like, this isn't you, it's not right. You got to have that, and it's important moving forward.
Yeah.
It's interesting though, like as your kids grow up, right? I'm in the season of life that Jordan's other client is in, right? Caitlin's making decisions about colleges, and she's being recruited, right? She's being recruited to run, and she's getting these offers, and it's all of these things, and it's helping her determine the school and the academics is most important, but almost neck and neck in that is who's the coach. Because the coach is going to determine the culture of that team. He's going to determine who else he's recruiting. He's going to determine how they talk to each other, how they treat each other, how they treat academics, what's most important. And it's been really interesting to be on this side of it, right? I mean, I didn't play college sports. I was never recruited. And so watching this and the text messages they send and how fast they're looking like at her mile split, right? On like the websites and things. And it's this attention to detail, but it's also in how they present it, right? How they communicate. And so being part of that and watching where Caitlin goes to get other advice outside of just me or outside of just her dad, right? And looking at it from her perspective, her number one is actually her coach in high school. The number one person that she goes to is the person that has seen her for the last 4 years, 365 days a year. I mean, girl runs every day. But that's how important this tribe is, right? Because I look at it and I think, I lucked into that she is an incredible high school coach who has an incredible wife that runs with the girls team every day. And so what happens is I lucked into it, but I shouldn't have. I shouldn't have let luck determine the circle that my daughter's in. I should have done some research, right? I should have met with the high school coach, or at least paid attention to the practice or what the other girls said about him. What I found was I got this coach who's incredible, who has an incredible family that invests in this team, but it's giving Caitlin the foundation for her next choices. And it's also an influence on those. So as we talk about community and building a tribe, understand that there are tribes that we can help orchestrate, and there are tribes that people will fall into just organically.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, it's funny. While she was talking about that, I'll never forget a conversation I had with somebody, and we were talking about, what's the difference between a trainer and a teacher, and I think trainers are, and I'll butcher this a little bit. I haven't quite massaged this the way that I want to in my mind, but trainers are people that will teach you a skill you can use in life. Teachers are people who teach a skill that you use to build your life. And what I mean by that is, like, if you ever study like John Wooden, right, who was one of the great coaches of college basketball, he used basketball as a platform to teach men about life. He was a teacher, whereas a trainer is going to teach you the skills of basketball. Does that make sense? I haven't quite gotten that to the way that I want.
Yeah, it's how I would like to find a true leader, right? Like a true leader is someone who influences thoughts and behaviors. And I think we have a lot of people that call themselves leaders that are actually just managers. They manage a job description, process, whatever it is, a task, and not actually leading like we do our kids or family or those around us.
Yeah, I think that leaders too are those that, to Jen's point, like the coach's wife running with the girls, like that to me is a true leader is somebody whose behavior is going to influence the behavior of others. I think that we're either a warning or examples to others. And the true leaders, the people that have made the biggest impact on my life are those that I don't have to really listen to their words. I can just observe their actions. And if I take that playbook and inject it into my life, I'm going to produce a similar result. There's 1.5 million people out there that want to talk about something. But I love the people that understand that truly, whether we're talking about a family or a business, it's all going to boil down to one question, which is, how well are you leading yourself? And, do you look at the leadership that you exude of yourself as kind of the foundation of everything? Because if you do that, number one, you're going to go on a great quest that is ultimately going to lead you to the destination of self-mastery. But also you give away this anxiety and all this like angst that we get about trying to control things we can't control. What's so cool about submitting to the process of self-leadership is that you're going to just focus on you and worry about nothing, because your example is what's ultimately going to set the tone for everybody else.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. And that's a teacher, right? I mean, that's a teacher teaching like thing, not just training to something when you go through it. I love that. I had a pastor say one of my favorite things. There's lots of ways to say this, but he said the tongue in your mouth has to match the tongue in your shoes, right? The things you say have got to match the walk, and you got to walk in that path, because then you could observe, like you pointed out, Jordan, right? Sometimes it's not what they say, it's just observing how do they show up.
Yeah, James Clear said one time, he's like, it's not about writing a book, it's about being the book. And I was like, yeah, I like that.
That's it.
I like that.
Well, we could certainly go on all day about this topic, and I love chatting with it. But we do like to end where if someone tuned out and they finally came back to us, we had one thing that we wanted them to walk away with. What is the piece of advice we would want them to hear and think about leaving this podcast episode?
Oh, I'll go first. I think I already said it. I believe that it's putting things to the perspective of your loved ones. And if you ever find yourself looking for a way to examine your life, and a way to do it in a healthy manner is to simply ask that question, right? Like, how is my approach to life different than the way I would want the people that I love to live theirs? And I believe that we should all live in like this, Jen alluded to it earlier, but it's almost like a figure eight of observation and examination. observing ourselves, examining ourselves, making sure that we're clear and that we have high senses of awareness around who we are, what we want, why we want it. And I think that that's about as good as you can be.
Mhm.
And eventually you're going to look up and just let go. And that's been a big lesson for me this year, is just, just let go and see what happens and be excited. And, the other thing that's helped me with this, Zach, and a big fan of the guy, Jocko Willink. He wrote the book Extreme Ownership,
Yeah,
right?
great book.
And Jocko has this perspective, and I use this constantly, especially with high performing people, because high performing people are very offensive minded. Like if I take Jen up to the side of a soccer field and I say, I'm the coach, but you get to pick your position. You want to play offense or defense? 99.999% of the time, Jen is going to pick offense. High aggression. She's going to choose that into the field.
I want to score the goal.
I want to score the goal. That's right. And so, when I used this yesterday, and I think it's really important, especially at times that things are hard in your life, that we want to continuously keep an offensive mindset even in defensive times.
Mhm.
And what Jocko Willink talks about is that when he was leading the Navy SEALs, what he would say is anytime something bad happened or something that they didn't want to have happen, he would just answer with, good. So interest rates are 1,000% now. Good. It was hard for us, but imagine how much harder it is for everybody else. That deal fell apart. Good. That means that we get to learn from it and protect our next person.
Mhm.
So just that feeling of like, let's be on offense all the time. And even if you're in a defensive season, you can greet every challenge with the right attitude.
Mhm. Mhm.
Jen, how would you answer that?
I think if I were looking at what's the thing to take away, when Jordan made the mention of you're either going to be a warning or an example. I think for me, I have been both in my life. I have been a warning of what not to do, and I've been an example of, hey, wait a second, she did make a good decision.
I think at the same time I have been. I think
Yeah,
I've been
me
both
too.
at the same time in
Me
different
too.
areas. Oh, yeah.
I think for me, I think if I were giving a piece of advice, it is fully understanding what the hustle's for. And many of you will say the hustle's for my spouse, or my hustle's for my partner, my hustle's for my kids, or my hustle's for, my parents, or generational wealth, or whatever it is. Great. But if it's for that, that means that person, that idea, that thing is a priority. And so what I would want is for you to just look up and say, hustle is great as long as the intention is accurate. Jordan's story, right, about the house in the middle of town. What I want everybody to understand, though, is very quickly hustle can get out of control. And so when you look at what your priorities are, right, I would challenge you to say, show me your calendar and I'll show you your priorities. And so where are the boundaries around the hustle? You can hustle a lot from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. and be present at home after 6 p.m. Right? You can take a break to go to a kid's birthday party or a soccer game or do these things. I think it's simply understanding if you're looking up and you're in this season of, I am hustling and I'm missing it. I'm missing it with people.
Mm-hmm.
Figure out a way. Jordan and I are talking about this idea of permission to pause, right? And giving yourself that permission. My pause was a summer. I needed a summer of a pause. Your pause may be an afternoon. Your pause may be a Sunday morning. Your pause may be, a weekend. But what you do with that pause is so important, right? We don't take a day off to scroll Facebook or Instagram. And that's what I think that we're finding is that people are like, oh my gosh, I just need a day off. And then I'm like, what'd you do? Oh, nothing. And I'm like, I just picture them sitting there on their phones, just scrolling, right? And so it's this idea of the pause, but understand what the pause is for. It's to center, it's to regroup, it's to look at your priorities, it's to look at your calendars and think, to Jordan's point, am I living the life? Am I leading the life that I want my kids to lead? Am I building the relationship with my spouse that I want someone to build with me. And so my advice would simply be hustle's fine. Do it, right? It gave me the ability to take a summer off. Awesome. But have the boundaries, have some predetermined pauses. Jordan has a exercise, right? It's like a what is it? 137, 147.
The W137. So I'll have to share this real quick. So it's every Wednesday, you're going to take 90 to 120 minutes where you do something to recharge your batteries. That could be getting a massage, going for a walk. For me, it's typically either picking up my girls and go getting ice cream or walking downtown. I live in a little college town and reading in a coffee shop. One is the 1 day off every single week. 1 day off where you don't work at all. Ours is Sunday. Sundays are sacred in the Freed household. Everybody knows that, especially because the Chiefs are usually on.
Yeah, I mean, it's all season.
I mean, of course, right? And then the 3-day weekend every single month. Honestly, it would be great if you would leave, right? Like we just did this last week. We left and went and saw some family. And what's so cool about it is when I'm in another person or another environment, I don't have to like clean things up or like fix things, or you're out of the day to day, right? Because if you're type A, you're just going to move all that anxiety from your work into your
yeah.
And then 1 7-day holiday vacation, whatever you want to call it, every 3 to 4 months. Like we're going to Cancun at the end of this month. And what that does, it just provides that, hey, I can see a break coming. And Jen's run marathons. I'm sure she's had this experience that the last mile of the marathon is oftentimes one of the easiest because you know it's about to end. And
so you get a 0.2 sign, and then you're like, who put a 0.2 on the end of 26 miles?
Oh, I love that. So yeah, that's the W137. I think of that as the active recovery plan of entrepreneurs in today's day and age.
I think that's the pause, right? Like that's a framework. It's a model, right? For those of you that like a model to follow. And I think if you're out of whack and you need a longer pause, that's okay too.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're whack, Wellness Wednesday. That's what we want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're welcome to pitch that, Jordan. You have something you do on Wednesdays, right?
Oh yeah.
Pausing.
In our Facebook, if you join our Facebook group, My Freed Life, and every Wednesday, 7:30 Central, we drop a 30-minute, some sort of inspirational lesson or interview, just a way for people to unplug and permission to pause, so to speak, for them to reflect on their week, both what's happened and where it's going. So it's totally free, just something we do every week. We love for everybody to join us.
Awesome. And that information, that'll be linked for everyone watching. That will be in the show notes. And then you'll be able to go there and check out what Jordan Freed is up to. We'll post Jen stuff when we get that too. We'll get that in there so you have all of that. I have loved the conversation today. You've given me a lot to think about. I don't know if you've convinced me to be a football fan yet. Further conversation.
Sunday. You need to watch on Sunday. It's a noon game, Central Time. We play the Broncos. Yep. And you should watch.
If you
check it out,
coach, you have to watch the Chiefs. You're watching a dynasty unfold right now, Zach. So do it for your clients, okay?
I don't want to miss out on history.
And Andy Reid is a phenomenal coach. He still calls the offense, right? We're talking about offense. So, and Zach, it's after you go to the early service, right? You can still you can eat lunch while watching the game. It's awesome.
I don't know. I've seen Jordan set up. This seems like a lot of work. I like to eat and nap. That's typically a good Sunday.
I mean, and clearly this guy does not know me well enough because
yeah.
I'm a big eater and napper, right?
Yeah, during the Chiefs game, we nap like when the Cowboys play.
Yeah. And
yeah, we're not napping during a Chiefs game.
Clearly I've been eating, right? I told somebody today, I'm an early developer. I developed the dad bod in 8th grade, right? So you don't get this thing from not snacking. Like, come on.
Well done. Well, friends, I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. It was great perspective to hear from both Jen and Jordan. I appreciate it. Please subscribe to hear more conversations like this. And every couple of weeks, we'll release these on Tuesdays. So join us to get notified. Till then, love you. Take care.